hello, good evening. It's awesome to be, for the first time in 2 years or so, in person with all of you. So real people, real faces, not on Zoom. That's awesome. My name is Paweł Faliński, and I'd like to invite you to a very brief but important, at least in my professional life, topic of MVP Rediscovered. During last few years, bad times for all of us, I believe, we experienced a lot of ups and downs, perhaps more downs. And one of the things that I personally like, and it makes me happy, are memes. And I love this one. I love this picture because it's about everything. It's about strategy in your company. It's about your portfolio management, incentives, schemes, development, professional development of people. It's about everything, but above all, it's about projects. So I typically use this picture to talk about something that is not an MVP, but a lot of people think minimum viable product is exactly this. Perhaps you heard it in a corridor or during a status meeting, any committee meeting. Guys, the deadline is soon, and we have only this. What to do? More money? No. More resources? No way. So somebody raises a hand and says, I know, let's release at least an MVP. And that's how MVP would look like. The thing is, minimum viable product and MVP is not what typically people think concern us MVP. Changing the scope, trying to save your project, it's not minimum viable product. Actual minimum viable product is something completely else. And I want to bring a few thoughts about it during next couple of minutes. First of all, minimum viable product is a name that I don't like. For a reason, it's not necessarily a product. That's the point. When somebody says minimum viable product, it's a product, part of a product, maybe not full version of a product, but a product. Not necessary. There are a few definitions that I personally like. I'm going to quote them in a second. Just from formal perspective, MVP tends to be recognized as something around lean UX or lean startup frameworks, these kinds of frameworks. So we in Agile world, we inherited from lean startup, and that's great. One of the definitions I like that does not come from lean startup movement, actually it comes from scrum.org, is as follows. Minimum amount of work to gain validated learning. So again, there's something minimum over here, not necessarily product per se, it's work, something that we have to do in order to learn. Validated learning, here lean UX, lean startup people would have a lot to say. It's to gain evidence about our assumptions, evidence about our thoughts, about hypotheses that we have related to the project, to product, to what we want to deliver. Another definition. The smallest thing you can build to test a hypothesis. That's Jeff Gottel, one of two authors of Lean UX framework, inspired by Agile, inspired by design thinking, inspired by Agile movement as well. So again, something small that you can build, you can create, not necessarily a full-blown product, something that helps you test a hypothesis. What's the difference between a hypothesis and an assumption in product development? Any guesses? I think the major definition is what we do with it. If I state a hypothesis, I say, I don't know if this will be like that, and I will test it. I will verify it. If I assume something, I assume it will work like that. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm not. It's domain of risk management. There is a risk that I might be wrong in the future. We manage it in a different way. So stating hypothesis about value of my product, for instance, that would be the domain of lean startup, lean UX, and MVP ultimately. There is one other definition that I technically like. It's earliest feedbackable product, what Henrik Knieberg, known from his works, for instance, his Spotify, he says it's about feedback, validated learning in more formal, in less formal language. It's feedback simply, what we learn about our product. So how does it look like in practice? Let's take a look. Airport in Radom, Poland. Perhaps you heard about it. What is so peculiar for those, especially from not from Poland, what is peculiar about the airport is that it costs a lot and nobody flies from there. There was literally one, maybe two airlines for a few weeks and that's it. That's an example, great example of maximum viable product. So we completed the entire product fully to learn whether somebody would be interested in flying from this town or not. Hypothesis verified negatively. Nobody is interested. It costs a lot. Can we do it? Of course we can. It's an example, but it's very, very expensive. If you can afford, fine. However, that's the problem. Frankly speaking, it's not just this airport. History of aviation knows a lot of airports like that. In Spain, for instance, I read during the pandemic, so a year, 2 years ago, that one of Chinese companies bought such an airport in Spain for €1. Because that was the total cost and how much it was worth. So in order to avoid these kind of situations that we spend a lot of money to learn, we may invest into MVP, and that's the point. Moving on, there is a nice chart over here called the truth chart, the truth curve. It shows a correlation between how much effort, how much money we need to put into validating our learning versus how much can we believe in the information gained. So if you invest a little, perhaps you receive information that you shouldn't trust a lot. Yeah, fair enough. If you invest a lot, maximum viable product, the believability of the information is pretty high. So we released the airport, and we are sure nobody wants to use it, right? That's the case over here. The case over here, something cheap would be. Let's ask a few citizens of the town. Hey, ma'am, hey, sir, would you like to fly from the airport? And they will say yes or no. I wouldn't believe it. Still, it's better than this area. Pure fantasy. Where literally we didn't ask anybody, we didn't make any effort to learn. That's the major difference. Typically, early in your product development, you would be interested in this kind of learning. Most likely, you don't have enough resources to perform full-blown studies, for instance. The bigger product is, the more specific your hypotheses are, and more money is needed, more effort is needed to validate learning. Typically, of course, there are some nuances. Let's take a look at the edge cases. What could be a great example, forgetting about the airport, obviously, a good example of an MVP, a validated learning, minimum effort to learn over here. Any paper prototypes. These are pictures from a training session I attended years ago. As you can see, this is iPad. And obviously everybody can see it's navigation, car navigation. What is tested over here with a random user, literally taken from a pool of people wandering around, is whether voice control of navigation makes sense or not. Over here you see a car, obviously. This is the driver, a person that we are testing, the paper prototype. These three people are from the development team. This one is the navigation because you talk to it, so it has to reply. A hint paper will not give you a reply, not verbal anyway. So that was the machine. And over here we were testing a scenario. How does it work if you have your kids over there? They're screaming, fighting, and so on. You try to talk to your navigation. Because the hypothesis about the product was pretty important. We believe that it's way safer to talk to navigation than to click the buttons, because if you click buttons, select whatever you want on the device, you're distracted. You should drive while trying to do something, so maybe talking would be better. Well, it is better, except for this scenario. We didn't write a line of code. We didn't buy any iPad even to verify that hypothesis. Of course, somebody could argue, well, but it's an edge case. What if, and so on? I would say, yes, we are here. I wouldn't put a lot of trust into that information, but it's better than nothing. It should be somewhere over here. On the other edge of the curve, we would have another type of prototype. This is SpaceX, Falcon rockets. Both of them are trying to land together after they were shut up. So up and running product already, not the final version, already up and running product. And the next hypothesis is, okay, if we build it, if it goes up, maybe it will land. If it's landing, maybe we can land two in parallel, and that was the case over here. So an example from a completely different part over here. I like this chart also for the reason that there's a lot of space in between. Anything between a paper prototype and full prototype of a product could be your MVP. That's what I wanted to say. So we can already see that's not necessarily what we thought at the very beginning, that you have a project, you're late, and you have to make something smaller. Let's carry on, because there are a few other questions related to the topic. Question number 1, does MVP need to be a product? Thank you. No, definitely no. Of course, if we go into details, there are various definitions of products, and a very broad definition is any result of a team. So if a paper prototype is a result of their work, it's to some extent the product. But if we are talking about the product that goes to market, real end product, no, it doesn't have to be product. Any kind of interviews, any kind of interaction with users, anything that UX researchers, part of UX designers, UX research, anything that user researchers actually do, it could be qualified as a full MVP. Have you heard about Alexa device? Have you heard how it was created initially? So for those who haven't seen it, it's a tiny box by Amazon, and if you talk to it, it gives you answers. Or if you plug into any device in the room, it can make the volume up of your music, switch off or on lights. Siri, but a little bit different and standalone. The very MVP of that was actually controlled by a real person, I heard. So you say, hey Alexa, what's the weather? And there was a guy somewhere with headsets. Google, what's the weather? Okay. Hey, this is Alexa, the weather today will be blah, blah, blah. Cheap way to find out what works, what doesn't work, how to operate, whether it makes sense, whether microphones work simply. If I ask a question to Alexa, pointing my head over there, but Alexa device is over here, does it make sense or not? How about any background noise that we have at home, and so on? You may verify a lot of hypotheses. Not only the major one, is it doesn't make sense to develop this product. Is anybody at all interested in it? But any small technical ones as well. Okay, let's move to another question. How many MVPs can a product have? What do you think?
As many as it takes.
I would say as many as hypotheses, as many as it takes. And here again, a few hints. Ideally, I would run one MVP at a time. Formally, it's quite difficult, or sometimes very difficult, to run a few experiments in parallel on the same product. Or it's simply easier to run one. So we have one MVP, we verify our hypothesis, and we move to another one. That would be ideally. I saw in practice few MVPs run in parallel on the same product or service. Fine, but you need, if we are talking about IT, perhaps it's easier than if we talk about a more physical product. Technically, as many hypotheses, as many MVPs. However, it doesn't mean that for each MVP, for each hypothesis, I have to have an MVP. It doesn't work like that. I can imagine that as a product owner, I can see 100 bigger or smaller assumptions or hypotheses about my product, and I decide to run 5, 10 maybe MVPs, and the rest of my hypothesis become assumptions. I will manage the risk related to with the fact that I might be wrong about the assumption. That's how I would see it. Moving on. Can I spend 6 months on an MVP? Can I have an MVP project of 6 months?
Yes, you can have.
Yes, of course.
You can have a 5 years.
5 years MVP, absolutely yes. I would say yes, but why? Yes, but why? The idea behind MVP is that it's minimum work that you need to do to gain information, to learn something. It depends on industry. I professionally spent last three and a half years dealing with Agile Consulting, also introduction of Kanban and Scrum in oil and gas industry, far away in North Scotland. No IT, believe me. I mean, there is IT department, the ones that gives you a laptop, desktop actually, nobody has laptops. Not before the pandemic. And the projects over there were with cross-functional teams of process engineers, mechanical engineers, chemical engineers, people that are keen in geology and any other very sophisticated sciences that I have no clue what they are about. And they run MVPs, obviously, but MVP, if you create a pump that needs to suck water below the ground level to retrieve oil from the other side. That's nothing that you would do in 2 weeks, right? So these MVPs were pretty longer, still not many years of development, because that would be counterproductive, and that would be against actually the all rules that we have about MVPs. Okie dokie. People ask, are there any tools that help us deal with hypotheses, with MVPs? This is selection of 2 tools, not because they are the best ones. These are the ones that I use, and my customers, not only myself, but also my customers, tend to say they are pretty nice. I can imagine there are many other ones, especially canvases. We have hundreds of them these days, but these are the 2 that I'd like to promote. The very first one on the left-hand side, Lean UX Canvas by authors of Lean UX framework. The canvas itself, Lean UX, Lean User Experience, is about designing your product, keeping in mind all 3 dimensions of value, business value. So what business problems are we solving over here? There's the business problem statement, but also user value, user outcomes, customer benefits. There's the whole section down there related to stating hypotheses, either about the business problem, about the outcomes, about the users. I feel this is my target user group. Fine, this is your feeling. Are they really interested in the product? Again, a hypothesis could be created around it. What's the most important things we need to learn first? Sounds like literally crafting an MVP. What's the least amount of work we need to do to learn the next most important thing? That helps, that supports definitely our work with MVP. Another one, older tool in my opinion, by Strategizer, the company that created business canvas, business model canvas, a pretty popular tool. I like it because it's method agnostic, it's very generic. A test card. So a card that helps team facilitate discussion about creating a test for a hypothesis. Hypothesis statement, we believe that's something. What would be the test? So the MVP, minimum amount of work we need to do. How are we going to measure it? What are the criteria that will tell us that the hypothesis was verified or not? Worth looking at. And perhaps we could have a separate meeting about each of these tools. So for the sake of time, I will leave you with that tiny hunger. MVP checklist that I use from time to time when I talk about MVPs with product owners. First of all, no MVP without a hypothesis. So what's your hypothesis? What's your assumption? What do you want to verify? Write it down. Start with I or we believe that, and then it's typically easier. Secondly, what do you need to build in order to verify it? And build means not necessarily build a full up and running product. It could be whatever activity that you want to take. And how will you know it's verified? Pretty important, because we can build a paper prototype, we can run an experiment with even with real users, and what? we have to have the criteria agreed on upfront. And I think that's it. Thank you very much. If you are interested into that topic or any other topics, I'll be there around definitely. Thank you very much. Take care.